Welcome to Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. This is episode 63 for all of our Francophone lovers out there and for everybody else. Google Translate. This episode is brought to you by Panier's Sanitary Wipes. If you have a fear in your rear, call Panier.
Wait, when did they become our sponsor?
I'm coming up with fictional sponsors, so when we get big...
Good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So when we get big, then I'm getting, like, it's practice, you know what I mean? Sam, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. You might hear I'm a little stuffy still. This is like week 4 of whatever illness Poppy keeps giving to me from daycare. But things could be a whole lot worse considering we're recording on a Monday night and we are just one day less than 24 hours removed from, or just about 24 hours removed from the Detroit Lions winning their second playoff game this year. How do you feel about that, Sean?
I got a little verklempt yesterday when they actually won that game. I was a little teary. When I told Carly, I think the only thing that would really put me over the edge for like crying for a Lions win would be if the Lions won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think that would actually move me to tears, but I mean, we're doing things. I'm 31. Lions haven't done this in my lifetime. So I think people keep saying, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. And I'm legit. I'm like, this is untrodden territory for the vast majority of Lions fans. So I'm just going to ride it, man. Do we have a shot against San Francisco next week? Yes, we do. Do I think we're going to win? No, but everything's icing on the cake at this point.
I mean, I watched the second half of the Packers 49ers game, and oh my God, how great would it have been if the Packers could have pulled it out, right? Because then it's another home game, right? That would have been 3 home games in a row instead of traveling to San Francisco, which I don't know if it's the most intimidating place to play. I have no sense of that, but I don't know. I think Samuels was hurt. Deebo Samuels. He might be back, but he's going to be 100%. So that's a potential upside.
I don't know. For me, home game, yeah, super important. But I did not want to play the Packers a third time. At that point, I feel like it's...
Oh, yeah, it's hard to beat the same team 3 times.
Well, and you lost to them last time.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, we lost to them on Thanksgiving, but...
Oh, that's right. That was a disappointing part of Thanksgiving.
For our non-American fans, we'll get into what we really want to talk about today, which is The Color Out of Space. H.P. Lovecraft, this is our 3rd episode in our Lovecraft series. YouTube listeners, Sam, I texted you this, but I uploaded our RSS feed. So our episodes are now automatically being published on YouTube, which is great. So welcome if you are a YouTube listener. Bad news if you listen to us on Google Podcasts. Google Podcasts is going away.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
At the end of March. So we're gaining one platform, losing another. So I guess that's just an update for everybody.
All right.
Color Out of Space.
Follow us on YouTube.
We're going to talk about the short story and the film that came out. I think we said it was like 2021. It's very recent.
2020, but relatively recently.
Starring Nick Cage, which gave me some hesitant thoughts at first, but we'll get into why I overcame those. In general, what did you think about the short story? And then I will just give a brief recap.
It was good. Similar to the other stories that we have read for the podcast, it's kind of a chronicle. So somebody recalling events. And in this case, it's actually even a step removed from that, where you have the narrator of the story mostly relating a story that was told to him by a first-hand account. So you have that kind of double double narrative, and it was very good. I one thing that always strikes me, that frequently strikes me in reading his short stories is how, and I've talked about this, is how vague he is in a way, describing the color, right? And how it's almost undescribable. And that's one, it's a really useful trick to not have to bend over backwards in describing things and kind of getting really tedious to the reader, but it also opens up the doors of the reader's imagination to fill in however they want to. And we can talk about how it was portrayed on screen, but that was something that was really interesting. It's a novel way of talking about things that are strange and otherworldly. I liked the overall story, and it's the use of time and the kind of degradation of things. I think that made it a little bit more authentic than in comparison to the film, which we'll talk about. But yeah, overall, I liked it. I don't think I liked it as much as The Whisperer in Darkness, but it was still very good. What about you?
I agree. I think I like The Whisper in Darkness more, but I still liked both of these more than Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, Call of Cthulhu now in retrospect is it's a little thin, right? You don't really get a good sense of the characters, of the people being affected by the action. Like, we could have spent so much more time with the Norwegian sailor, right, or the detective Lagras, and we never really got a sense of them. And part of that was maybe just a constraint of the story that he was writing, the medium in which it was being distributed. But yeah, now we're really getting it's a smaller cast of characters, this one. It's a very tight geographic setting, so you can really focus on the people involved and the events as they transpire.
So here's our short recap. The story begins with a surveyor going out into, oh God, is it Vermont again?
Is it Vermont again, or is it Western Mass?
I don't remember. It's New England. Sam's going to look it up. But we have a guy who goes out doing a survey because they are about to build a dam that is going to flood a portion or a valley of whatever state. This is how good and well prepared we are. And when he's going out to do a survey to figure out the environmental impacts, he comes across an individual who's lived there for a very long time, who then regales our storyteller about a situation that happened in the 1880s, so about 40 years before modern time or present day. And we are told about a story of an asteroid falling from the sky. It lands, and over a couple years, this asteroid that is made up of material not known to anybody on Earth begins to infect the soil and a specific well at a certain farmhouse or farm. It slowly drives the residents of the farmhouse crazy, and they all end up dying under different circumstances. The livestock are killed. They are basically kind of turned into husks of themselves. They're dried out and withered. Weird flora begins to grow all around the farm, emitting like a weird cosmic light that people just can't seem to describe. And eventually, the old man that is telling this story to our surveyor takes part in the story and actually goes to the farmhouse to check in on the family in particular, where he finds the wife upstairs in terrible condition, what they don't even really describe
Yeah, it's
her
like
in particular.
so horrible you couldn't even describe it.
And it's so vague, and there has to do with smell. So apparently she's been locked in this room in the attic. His two sons are dead. He comes upon the head of the household, the patriarch. He's barely alive in the house. And basically, what we uncover is that there's this being, this entity that is the color out of space, that is living in the well and feeds off of life or organic material. And eventually, there's a big explosion. the light returns to space, and the farm that this asteroid fell on is withered. Most of every living thing is like disintegrated, turned to ash. And there's a fear that a part of the entity that infected the town, or not the town, but the farmhouse and the people, was still living in the well. And you're led to believe that if the valley is flooded in the 1920s, 40 years later, could this possibly infect the water supply for the larger metropolitan area that will rely on it? There's a lot that goes into it, but that's a gist of what this story is about. A little different than the movie. The movie takes place in modern times. There's a couple things that are adjacent to the short story.
Yeah, I similar to you. I think it's been a couple years since I've seen the movie, so I had to refresh my familiarity with the plot. I think it one thing that the short story did is you mentioned it. You know, it's over a year, maybe like 2 years or something. It's not a long period of time, but it's long enough where there's like multiple cycles, multiple seasons that pass, and the farmer, as farmers would, kind of describe what happens during that season with the harvest and with the animals and whatnot. And the movie, it takes place, I think, over the course of just a couple of days, seemingly. I don't recall there being a lot of time passing. And I think that's one aspect where for the movie to be suspenseful, you have to accelerate time. But the short story, I think it's effective in in bringing to life kind of the slow degradation that this family goes through. And like it starts small and it kind of ramps up and people start, the kids are acting strange. And then that gets, accelerated. And then all of a sudden, yeah, people are basically becoming desiccated and the land is becoming withered after it looked, like the plants were huge when they tasted bad and the animals were, started off a little jittery and then they got really crazy.
Yeah, and it's just different from the movie. In the movie, we have Nicolas Cage's character brings his family to a farm that was willed to him. And then we have the asteroid falling. But I don't know. I liked the visuals of the film. And the short story leaves a lot to the imagination for you to kind of interpret what's happening to the family. And there's some pretty fucked up things in the movie, like the mom and the kid being fused together by this
Yeah,
light. And some like real like Carpenter body horror
I
things
was going to
like
say
that.
body horror is the term that comes to mind, and you don't get that at all in you don't get the body horror aspect of it. You get the horror aspect of it, which is the mother and the family is basically locked in the attic because she went crazy, and then slowly was basically withered away and desiccated. And it's implied but not described explicitly that the the living character, I think his name's Ami or Amy. I don't know. It's kind of a old fashioned spelling. He basically finds her desiccated corpse up there. And maybe it's more grotesque than that. At the very least, that's what you find. But yeah, in the movie, there's humans being melded together. And the mom cuts her fingers off at one point, like kind of
Yeah.
just haphazardly. And it's a lot more shocking and gross out than the book.
Yeah. And they do a really good job of that scene where she cuts her fingers off. In the book, Lovecraft is very clear that the individuals who live at the farmhouse, part of their insanity is not knowing how much time is passing when they go into these moments of, I don't know how to describe it. They stare off into space and like they're caught in their own thoughts.
And
And all of
they
a
also,
sudden, like hours will go by.
and there's kind of a strange attraction to the place, right? Like they like the taste of the water, right? That I think that was the detail where the he's not the he's kind of the narrator. I don't know what the literary term is for the narrator within the narrator, but he like tasted the water and it's like it felt off to him, and he said
Yeah.
something, and the family of that lived at the farm was like, no, no, it's fine. And there's, I guess, a little bit of that in the movie as far as I remember, because like one of the sons is attracted to the well, and you have that in in the book as well, also, but you don't have the like sense of, I guess it's done differently to your point where, yeah, the whole finger cutting scene, I remember that being very strange because, like, did she actually do that or did she imagine doing that? Did that really happen? Because I don't recall them freaking out like, oh my God, she chopped her fingers off. Like, it's kind of a minor thing, right? I think that's
No, it's
right.
not that minor because they leave and drive to the
Oh, they go to the
hospital.
hospital. Okay.
Yeah, and then that's when things really start to ramp up
That's
because
right.
the
That's right.
parents are gone, and then the daughter stops paying attention to the kid. Things really start to get fucked up. The kid sees the weird like praying mantis bug come out of the well, and yeah, like things really
Oh,
escalate.
and the daughter's a witch, right? She's
Yeah,
a
and that's
like
what I
a
wanted to bring up.
okay.
Like the short story begins with them talking about the histories of witchcraft, but then that those are all just like old wives' tales.
Hmm.
What's really fucked up about this area is the asteroid. And then that's when they go into this story about what happened 40 years ago. But like they reference in the movie that the daughter is using the Necronomicon. And like all of this then comes back to like these Lovecraft themes.
Hmm.
And it's just
Which
so
the
good. Yeah.
the Necronomicon is not mentioned in the short story, and I think
But the witchcraft is, which
yes,
to me
very
is tied into that Necronomicon.
very in yeah in the initial kind of like setting the stage of going out to the hills. And it's in some ways it is similar, and that's, I mean, it's fitting that we kind of initially like, was it going, were we going back to Vermont, because it might as well be the same place, right? And I think Western Mass and Vermont are, they border each other, so it's not exactly that far away, but you kind of this idea that strange things can happen in the hills. And is it witchcraft? Is it something else? Can we explain it? Because these are, I think he often uses the term rustics to describe the farmers and the mountain men, and it can be interpreted as a way of kind of dismissing the things that they're saying because, oh, they're superstitious, they're backward, they're uneducated. But as we've seen in the stories that we've covered, well, the things that they're talking about, there is actually a kernel of something very strange and otherworldly happening here. Is it aliens? Is it the color out of space? Is it witchcraft? We find out through the story, but the point is there is something there. It's not just made up rumor.
In the movie, did you think that she somehow summoned this asteroid?
I
Because
never got that.
that's what I had interpreted.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Does
which I
she
don't
end
know.
up? What happens to the daughter at the end of the movie? Does she die or does
She
she
kind of
like?
like does she like dissolves because she's standing in front of the well as the like in the short story when the farm itself like blows up and the color returns to space.
Mm-hmm.
She's standing in front of the well when that begins to happen. And our water surveyor, which is another common theme between the short story and the movie, walks up to her, tries to get her to leave with him, but she's already like infected with whatever it was. She's been drinking the water. And then she like dies right there. Yeah.
Does
At
she
one point, she's like glowing.
does she die or is she like transported to another dimension with the color out of space?
I think she dies.
Die. Okay. Yeah, I only watched it once, and I thought it was a fun like Friday night popcorn movie. At that point, I was even less familiar with H.P. Lovecraft stuff, and I certainly hadn't read the story. But yeah, to me, the big differences were the explicit practice of witchcraft, the reference. I mean, it's not like the Necronomicon is completely made up out. It's like it's not even. It's very prominent within H.P. Lovecraft's mythos. It is not at all mentioned in this short story, where it is worked into many of his other short stories. So it's kind of, it's not out of the realm of the impossible. I could see how they would want to heighten that up because it did seem too like they wanted to make it a lot more character drama in the film as opposed to the short story. It's really just about the color out of space. We have no reason to ever think that any of the characters are malicious toward one another or are abusive, right? It seems like people are trying to do the best they can in a desperate situation, whereas the movie, like Nick Cage just kind of going crazy, like there's a dynamic between him and the mother. the daughter's obviously doing her thing with the witchcraft. You got the guy, is it Tommy Chong plays the dude who
Yeah.
goes out in the woods, right? Like,
Yep.
which that's a complete fabrication. There's no similar character. I
But
guess.
even he talks about being able to hear beings underground.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like the movie goes farther in establishing that there's an actual entity,
Hmm.
not just like this random color that's infecting things. Because at one point the kid looks down the well and sees like this weird like pulsating brain like attached to the side of the well. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Vaguely.
Yeah.
And to me that looks like a mind flayer brain
Hmm.
when it's attached to the well
Hmm.
like that. And yeah, and I don't know, I think I like both. I like that there's an actual enemy in the movie, like there's a physical representation of a being, but I also liked the mystery surrounding it being a color, because there's moments where in the short story when the group of men go to investigate what's happened at the farm, they one of them sees a color come out of the well,
Hmm.
and we're led to believe that there's a being because something came out and like attacked the horse and did this stuff. And then yeah, I like the mystery, but I'm happy that there's two different interpretations of it so
Yeah.
that I can have it both ways.
I think I watched The Color Out of Space around the same time that I watched The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing,
Mhm.
which you mentioned body horror, a lot of body horror in that movie. And I think it was, I could see that maybe it was an homage with some of the flesh monsters, basically with the mom and the son, and then the alpacas,
Oh,
which
dude, the
that was a freaky scene.
alpacas fused with the dog.
Yeah.
I hate a movie where you kill a dog.
Yeah, it's tough. That's why I haven't watched any of the John Wick movies.
Well, it's really only the first John Wick movie.
I don't want to watch the
They,
sequels if I haven't seen the first one.
I know, but they don't kill a dog in every John Wick movie.
What if that was the impelling thing in the start of every? It's like,
That was
oh, another
always.
another dog. I gotta go on a murderous rampage. Um,
But if that's what's really holding you back, I really think you should at least suck it up for the first one, because
yeah,
the John Wick movies are phenomenal.
yeah. Haley said, I think I could. She said that she thinks she could handle it now.
Even
She's ready to watch.
if you watched it and then paused it as soon as the dog died, and then just tell Haley that's what happened. Because you really don't need to, they don't really show it, A, and then B, you could just pick up right when the dog dies and you know
That's true.
exactly,
That's true.
you know the dog died.
You're
And then
talking
you
about
just
like
go
five
from there.
seconds of screen time, right? Yeah. Okay. There were. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to throw out to you, which is the whole idea of the color. And you mentioned the in the short story when the group of men goes to the farm and they see one of them sees the color coming out of the well. It reminded me a little bit of, I think it's the term is the deadlights from Stephen King, specifically It. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I remember, I've never read it. I've only seen the two film adaptations.
The the when you say two, you mean the recent part one and part two?
Yeah,
The
with Bill Skarsgård.
Okay, but have you seen the older TV movie version with Tim Curry as Pennywise?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's displayed on in that version, and I don't recall how the modern or the contemporary movies treated it, but I think that the like obviously Pennywise the clown is just one version or like one way of that creature is seen by humans, and then there's like a spider monster to it as well. But then I think it's quote unquote true form is actually just lights, or that's the closest thing that the human brain can associate with it.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
Okay.
and I know there's other connections between Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft, and Lovecraft is often cited as an inspiration or an influence on Stephen King. But I think maybe that might be a thread there. I haven't investigated it, but I think it might be something where the color out of space, the color is what humans see because that's what's within our visual spectrum, and there's something else going on there, is similar to this whole like the dead lights idea, where there's something else going on there, but all we can see are these lights.
You know what these short stories remind me of? The Netflix miniseries, Guillermo del Toro's Scary Stories series. Have you watched any of those?
No, I haven't, but I know Lovecraft was influential on
Del
Guillermo del
Toro.
Toro. Yeah.
His shorts, it's like a mini series of just short stories, all horror.
Mm-hmm.
Those are amazing and very reminiscent of some of these Lovecraft stories that we're getting as well.
Okay.
So if you've liked, this is to you and to general audience members, if you've liked these HP Lovecraft stories and you're into some horror, I would recommend going onto Netflix and looking up, I don't remember the name of it, but Guillermo del Toro, his series of short horror stories. They're very, very good.
All right. Is there anything else that we have about The Color Out of Space?
Not from me. Next week, if you have been reading along with us, we will be tackling the Dunwich Horror. So if you would like to keep going along with that. No, we didn't. We decided not to do that. Next week, we're doing a Rings of Power little ditty.
Yes.
So 2 weeks from now, you've got some time to read the Dunwich Horror. Next week, some news dropped, potential spoilers for season 2 of Rings of Power. So if you don't want anything spoiled, don't listen to us next week for Rings of Power. If you're like us and don't give a shit anymore about Rings of Power, feel free to listen and talk with us about it.
Well, here's a teaser. We will be discussing what are described as leaks. Now, are they leaks that are actual things happening in season 2, or are they things that were intentionally released in order to generate attention?
And if they are leaks, are Sam and I excited about the potential changes, or
do we want to jump off a bridge?
are we just so numb to Rings of Power? I don't know. We'll find out. I have to reread the article.
Yeah.
Personally, I skimmed it, and there were, I'll say, a couple things excited me. A couple things I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Not nearly as enjoyable as an H.P. Lovecraft short story. So
Dunwich Horror,
which we will cover in 2 weeks. Next week, we are going to do a Rings of Power season 2 update or preview, season production update for Rings of Power, but then Dunwich Horror, and then we will announce which story we will cover on that podcast, which story we will cover after the Dunwich Horror, because there is a large body of work for H.P. Lovecraft, and we're going to continue working through it while we are surveying the landscape for other fantasy items to consume and discuss.
Yeah, until we get bored with Lovecraft, and then we'll do something else. If you feel so passionate as to want to suggest something, you can email us at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. That is all one word. You can follow us on Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. On Facebook, we have a podcast group, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things podcast group. Like I said at the beginning, we're on YouTube now. We're leaving Google Podcasts with everybody else. And that's it from me. Go Lions.
Go Lions. All right, everybody. We will see you next week. In the meantime, don't drink the well water.